Army presents The Big Picture, an official report produced for the armed forces and the American people.
One of the finest tributes to the military stature of any country may be indicated by the number and variety of published works on its military history. Books reflecting the entire spectrum of opinion on the experience, achievements, and merits of wars fought. Our country has been fortunate to have produced so many capable military critics and historians to chronicle every major action of every major war we have engaged in. The Korean War has been no exception. Many volumes have been written about this ideological conflict. Many more will be written, to be sure. I'm Sergeant Stuart Queen, your host for The Big Picture. In two previous Big Picture issues, we presented the Korean War from its start in the summer of 1950 through Thanksgiving Day of that year. In this issue, we will present the final chapter of the Korean War. These two books contain some penetrating thoughts about the Korean War. They were written by a distinguished citizen soldier, Brigadier General S.L.A. Marshall. In these books and in other documents he has written, General Marshall recorded the Korean War as he saw and analyzed the conflict. In 1951, the Department of the Army sent General Marshall to Korea, the third major conflict in which he served as an Army officer. The result of his experiences in Korea and his long and valuable experience with our military establishment make him eminently qualified to comment on the Korean War. And now, The Big Picture presents this distinguished citizen soldier, Brigadier General S.L.A. Marshall. General Marshall?
Sergeant Queen.
General Marshall, against the background of your far-reaching experience in wars we fought, what are some of your observations and conclusions in regard to the Korean fighting?
Basically, the tactics of the Korean War taught us a lot about mountain fighting, defense against night attacks, and the like, but the fighting was essentially the same as World War II. That is, the battles were won by the infantry with the usual support from the other arms and services. But in one sense, the Korean War was different.
In what respect, sir?
Well, it was a total ideological war. That is to say, communist North Korea, governed and supported by the communist world, estimated that South Korea was ripe for the taking. In an ideological sense, the opportunity could not be overlooked to seize the territory and to extend communism over more of Asia. Obviously, the communist world planned to benefit from the quick victory in South Korea at our expense.
Does this in any way explain the entry of the Chinese communists into the Korean War?
In part, yes. Primarily, I believe it was because our advancing United Nations forces came within tactical reach of Red China. Our forces had become overstretched and vulnerable to the attack, and they grabbed the opportunity. Before the Red Chinese attacked, the United Nations Command believed that Communist China would not enter the war if we confined our advance to the area south of the Yalu River.
But it is a military fact, is it not, General, that it takes time, lots of time, to organize and move an army into position to attack? How did the Chinese communists do this without revealing their plans to us?
Give them their due. They are masters of concealment and deception. It took them 60 to 90 days to organize their so-called volunteer army, and it required another 2 weeks or more to move the army into a position to attack. Before the Red Chinese sprung the trap, they had moved 80,000 troops across the Yalu and into positions deep into North Korea. There was a total of 120,000 Chinese communist troops ready when they attacked, and all of this accomplished without the United Nations command realizing the intent of Red China.
Deception or not, General, how did the Chinese communists keep our air reconnaissance from spotting the large concentrations of troops, vehicles, and equipment moving into North Korea?
Before they entered the war full length, the Chinese forces moved only at night. During the daylight hours, they packed themselves into whatever buildings, houses, and huts they could find. They were jammed in like sardines. Their vehicles and equipment were camouflaged expertly. They were not highly mobile, however. They advanced at the marching pace of a man. But their columns stayed concealed in day, and the few who walked abroad made expert use of shadows to foil air reconnaissance.
It is at this point, General Marshall, that we're going to present the photographic record of the Korean War, starting with the 8th Army's offensive the day after Thanksgiving in 1950. An operation beginning with high hopes, but one which was quickly changed in its tactical complexion.
8th Army's end-of-the-war offensive was launched the day after Thanksgiving in 1950. It started out smoothly, but by nightfall of the second day, the UN was facing a new enemy in Korea, and a new war had begun. The Chinese rolled swiftly southward, splitting the Allied line and cutting off Marine and 7th Division troops in the east near the Chosin Reservoir.
We took turns sleeping in the daytime. It was too cold at night. I heard later we lost more people from freezing than from enemy action. Even the mortar rounds froze through the casings. The Chinese had an awful lot of people between us and the beach, but the harbor at Hung Nam was our only way out. All our resupply came by air. Without that, we never could have made it. Same goes for the close air support we got from the Marine Air Wing and the Air Force.
They fought their way toward the sea through an enemy force which outnumbered them 5 to 1. Pausing only to evacuate wounded by air from Hagaru, they pushed on, reaching safety on December 10th. They found Hungnam a busy town. Within the harbor's perimeter, heavy weapons worked around the clock, throwing up a curtain of fire through which the enemy divisions dared not pass. Behind the guns, a near miracle of planning, organization, and teamwork was taking place. A massive amphibious landing in reverse. In the space of 10 days, more than 100,000 fighting men were evacuated. North Koreans, by the tens of thousands, flocked to the dock area to plead for evacuation. From this one area, more than 90,000 North Koreans deserted their homes rather than return to the life they had experienced under communism.
We were the last to leave. When we were gone, the harbor would be too. We set blocks of TNT and laced hoses filled with jellied explosive all along the waterfront. When we left, the harbor was one big ticking time bomb.
The evacuation convoy steamed southward toward the free ports of Pusan and Pohang. Their troops would reland, regroup, and move back to engage the enemy.